Okay, here we are still at the Women in Estate Agency event here in London. We're interrupting everyone's lunch, but gladly we've got a few people that have come to watch this podcast, driven, I think, by this lady's amazing. I don't know if it's inspirational, amazing, shocking,
it's all of those things.
Of the above.
It's all of those things.
Talk on stage, just fresh off stage. Welcome, Anne Deckers, Director of Base Property, and as you said, London's most wanted estate agent.
But also,
exactly.
but also not just wanted and desirable when it comes to being a letting agent in East London. You've got a story to tell where you were wanted in a different way, albeit a few years ago. Can you tell us that quickly?
Yeah, you asked me to put about 20 years of my life in about 2 minutes, but let's start. Met somebody trying to escape an abusive household, got married, ended up marrying someone that wasn't what he told me he was. Traveled the world, but wasn't really traveling the world. He was actually running, didn't know it was. Interpol got involved. Eventually they caught up with us. And I talked on stage about the aftermath and what it meant for me to basically hit rock bottom, lose everything, and end up in London having to start from nothing.
And that aftermath so involves you moving around the world to various countries. I think you said, London, Paris, Jordan, Canada. You think that you're on a kind of, a nice whirlwind trip with your husband.
Yeah.
And actually you're evading the authorities. Because it turns out, he says he's a diamond trader, but the diamond trading business was a front for money laundering, for the proceeds, we think, I don't know if this was proven, but for the proceeds of
it was definitely
cannabis.
Proven. It was cannabis.
Wow, but you were an innocent party caught up in this. But you then get interviewed by the police, and they lock you up.
6 months.
Not for the full 6 months. They kept me for 48 hours.
Right.
But for 6 months, they took my passport.
Right.
2 to 3 times a week, I had to report back. They wouldn't let me leave Belgium. I kept saying that I didn't know anything, that I wasn't with him, that I didn't... At the time, I didn't know any of this story.
Did they think that you were complicit in the
They
crime?
thought I was complicit. The sad part of it is that looking back at that story now, if I at the time had gone, I'm married to him, I can't tell you anything, the story would have been very, very different. But I didn't do that. Based on my history of how I felt, and also the 90s in Belgium, it's a police state. I definitely had no human rights there.
But how scary is that then? So you get put in a cell, albeit let out, and you have to report back. But knowing that you could just be grabbed from your home, your flat, or off the street at any time, and there really wouldn't be anything you could do about it.
They were listening in, they were following me, they were absolutely convinced that I would lead them to him. But I never gave him up.
But you also get convicted in your absence.
Yeah, this is about 5 years later. So obviously the law does catch up with him. He does get extradited to Belgium, so he does become a supergrass. So that was the whole reason.
A supergrass, and you didn't. Was it snitches get stitches? So you didn't.
I never gave him up, but he did blab. And
but that puts you in danger.
The reason they kept me in that time was basically to put pressure on him to make sure that he would sign on the dotted line for that deal. And that was the collaboration between Interpol, between Belgium and Holland. And so, I thought, oh, what a lofty person. He did sign on the deal to get me to come back out. Like I said in the talk, I investigated my entire case, and that took me years, because we're not just talking about a couple of files. This was a room filled with papers that I had to go through to get absolutely everything.
I think the whole talk was recorded, so people will be able to watch the whole speech online and get into the detail. And when you got to the end of those 5 years, you talked about when you were, you were freed, you were all of the charges were dropped.
Well, you got exonerated.
Exonerated, yes. Yeah. And you found your superpower. And I'm really keen for our audience to, how do you find that? Where did you take that inspiration from?
When you've got nothing left to lose anymore, you have to start building a new version of yourself. And I'd never really known who Anne was. She'd always had a mask, she'd always had to hide from the world, both mentally but also physically. And, all that trauma, all that stress somehow had given me this hypervigilance. Whenever I walked into a room, I would scan everything. Where was the exit? Could I get out quickly? Was anybody following me? Was anybody looking at me strangely? And so I realized I could not keep living my life like that. It drives you nuts.
To learn to trust anybody must have been so hard, but you found a group of people who you could share your experience and drive.
And the funny bit was that I came from lofty Belgravia, ended up on the Isle of Dogs on a council estate where I would walk in through a front door that was left open because you knocked on and said, Serena, I'm coming in for a cup of tea.
Lovely.
And they were real people. They didn't have much, but they would share whatever they had. And that's where I learned.
Happened, you wouldn't have ended up in that situation where it ultimately then through, what was the name of the business?
Homes Direct.
Homes Direct. That's where you met Christian Byfeld. So if you hadn't done that, you would never have met. You probably now wouldn't be a partner, a very successful one, not only in a lettings business, but also the depository, your prop tech business, and probably one of the most enduring and endearing partnerships in property. I mean, seriously, you guys have been together professionally for what, 20 years?
Well, Based celebrated 20 years last year, so we're coming up to our 21st birthday with Based, and I knew Chris 2 years before, so we have had a friendship of 23 years.
He was telling us about that journey of starting. I'm thinking of going to do this myself, and without hesitation, you were, I'm coming, or vice versa.
Well, no, actually, it was funny. I listened to your podcast and it was fantastic.
Get it wrong?
No, he didn't get it wrong, but I didn't remember it that way. Again, how you see something, what angle you take it from it, and bearing in mind that this is over 20 years ago, brain fog is real at this stage in my life, so I might think of things differently. But it is true, he did come and offer me that job, and it was indeed my wife who said, you have far more knowledge and contacts than him. You don't need to do that. You can do this by yourself. But I still didn't have that self-belief. I didn't have the balls. He had the balls. I didn't.
You needed each other. I mean, that's a perfect partnership.
It was the perfect partnership.
You both needed each other. So
Absolutely.
Of all that's happened to you, I mean, being chased around the world, being at large, being a fugitive, as you were, there's been positives from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, hard question to answer this. Would you change anything? No, would you change anything?
No, people have asked me this in the past, and I've always said, in hindsight, everybody's brilliant.
Yeah.
But every decision I made somehow got me to today. And if I had done anything different, when I was growing up in Belgium and thinking about how I wanted to escape, there was always that one thing in my mind that I didn't want to be a small housewife with small kids in a small house with a small mortgage. I wanted to leave Belgium. I wanted to travel the world. And so I'd already started it from there. And I'm not throwing shade on anybody who wants that. That is their journey. But for me, it just gave me the world. And
just to go back, and obviously look, we're limited for time, but the bit we've missed out, of course, is the reason that you got into a controlling, coercive relationship is because you suffered abuse in your earlier life. So the kind of abuse led to something almost, I mean, maybe not as bad, but in a parallel, another really horrendous, challenging situation.
It was literally jumping from the frying pan into the fire.
But I've got to say, you're not the only person that we've spoken to on this podcast that has gone from the early years being not very nice at home to then being propelled in a situation where you think you're with someone that is supporting you and helping you, but it turns out they're actually a very bad person.
It is basically the behavior that you know. It's the lifestyle you know. It's what you know. You keep going back to it. And again, that was the whole story that I wanted to tell today, was that, escaping is not an act of running. It's not an act of getting away from a person. It's actually in your mind. Like, you have to get yourself free. You have to unlearn behavior. You have to find new coping mechanisms, new strategies. And you have to start realizing, I am actually worthy, I am actually good enough, and I don't need to put myself in those difficult situations.
25 years ago, did you think genuinely in your wildest dreams that you would now be a very successful businesswoman in the UK property industry, married to the person of your dreams?
Not at all. Not
Funny
at
how
all.
things turn out, isn't it?
And you encapsulate that in grace.
Grace.
Yeah. Can you just expand on that for those that work here today?
when I started preparing for the speech, I looked back at those pictures, and as a 50-something-old, I was thinking, bloody hell. Like, seriously, girl, what were you thinking? And then I thought, I can't think about her like that. Little Anne made decisions because of what she was going through, and she wanted to escape. And so, although I know better now, I have to give that little girl grace. I have to say to her, you know, you are safe now. I've got you. You made it. You don't have to worry anymore. And then I started thinking, well, I was researching, how do you do a speech? Because I've never done this. And everybody said, oh, you must have an acronym.
Okay.
So that's where it came. I started thinking about the life lessons that have stood me in good stead. And so grace was what I came up with. And so it was gratitude, resilience, authenticity, courage, and excellence.
Well, and you've definitely lived by that.
Yeah.
Another amazing guest that,
Absolutely
I mean,
fantastic.
probably if you turned a slightly different corner 25, 30 years ago, you wouldn't be here.
No.
At all.
And is that the first time you've been on stage and told that story? I think you've got a new career coming out of today, because that could be on a speaker's circuit.
And not just having...
I was very nervous.
You were fantastic. It was absolutely
not
fantastic.
genuinely, not just having people glued to what you were saying, but your bravery is incredible. Standing up in front of 450 people to make a speech is bad enough. But when you're airing all of your history and your past and some real challenges from your history in front of the public, that's a very hard but very admirable thing to do. So well done.
Well done.
I hope at least if somebody, who's ever gone through something bad can take something away that, you can pick yourself up and dust
I think
yourself
you are
up.
going to have a queue of people talking to you. We need to let you go and get some lunch and get ready for the afternoon.
Absolutely.
Women in a State Agency have yet again called out the most amazing speaker, most amazing story, and also congratulations on your amazing business, because so many awards as well, and good luck for the rest of 2025.
Thank you very much.
One more guest to come before we go back in and get the tissues out and start crying again.
The rain of tissues, obviously.
Rain of tissues, of course. Right, we'll be back in a sec.
Thank you.